just trying to find the right epic English word. Fitting, since tonight we'll be exploring the poetry of one Gerald Bostock. His horribly filthy poem, Thick as a Brick, as performed by Jethro Tull. We're going to do this while enjoying the Victorian English recipe of HAYMAN'S Old Tom Gin. So, enough of my talking. Let's drink some gin and listen to some records. All right, if you're not new to this channel, you've heard me talk about HAYMAN'S of London before. HAYMAN'S is known for producing traditional recipes of gin, and for them, it's not doing anything retro or old school because HAYMAN'S has actually been around since the time of these traditional recipes. Nothing's really more traditional than a HAYMAN'S Old Tom Gin. Now, other distilleries will produce Old Tom Gin, and none of it really tastes the same. So you're left wondering, well, what is the actual traditional Old Tom? Well, HAYMAN'S gives you a pretty good view of that because, again, they've been producing this stuff since 1849. And 50 years after the London gin craze, HAYMAN'S was producing things like Old Tom. So Charles Dickens himself likely poured himself a glass of Old Tom, which is kind of interesting to think of that connection as you're drinking this gin. So you might be wondering, what is an Old Tom? Well, Old Tom gins used to actually be the most popular of gins. Got replaced by London Dry at the turn of the 20th century. But before that, Old Toms was the gin of choice. It's sweeter than a London Dry, and the sweetness is really brought about by the botanicals that are used. You'll see some modern Old Toms add extra sugar to it to kind of artificially create that sweetness. But if you're drinking HAYMAN'S, it's right there in the botanicals. Which is a really nice, smooth drink to have. Where the name came from, no one really knows. There's stories that a tomcat fell in a vat of gin and ended up getting brewed and distilled with the gin, and people were actually drinking tomcat, which is why they named it Old Tom. But that sounds maybe like a Victorian English myth. But in any case, it's an experience, and it brings you back to maybe a darker Victorian English street. One where you'd see characters like Fagin roaming around. And to me, that atmosphere that's created by this goes so well with Jethro Tull. Now, sometimes people will drink a Old Tom in a gin and tonic. To me, that's a little bit too sweet. An Old Tom is best to me just neat. The natural sweetness of botanicals is something you don't really want to bruise with a tonic. If I'm going to mix it with anything, I might squirt a slice of lime in there. But really, an Old Tom to me is best enjoyed just neat. So what we're going to listen to as we sip on this Old Tom today is Jethro Tull's follow-up to what some would say their landmark masterpiece, Aqualung. Their follow-up, to me, is actually better. Thick as a Brick. Now, Thick as a Brick is Ian Anderson's kind of spoof of a progressive rock concept album. Here's the thing. The spoof doesn't work because Ian Anderson actually produces one of the greatest progressive rock concept albums of all time. It's the story of a poem written by this kid. Apparently, if you read the newspaper articles in this, the poem was deemed offensive, and so after he won, the prize was revoked. What is the poem? Well, the poem is a look at adult life from the view of this child, this cynical child who's writing this poem. Musically, it's some of the most powerful things that Jethro Tull would create. And it still keeps that vibe that you get in Aqualung. You know, the fact that Ian Anderson is able to capture this Dickensian atmosphere on most of the Jethro Tull albums. The later ones maybe not so much, and the early ones not so much, but around Aqualung and Thick as a Brick, and then going on into the folk period, the Heavy Horses and Song from a Wood, the biting social satire mixed with the music, with the that very folky but very English vibe to it, evokes like Dickens stories like Bleak House or the Pickwick Papers, or these Dickensian works that really get at the social fabric and critique it in a pretty unique way. And I feel like Ian Anderson's writing does the same thing. And sure enough, in Thick as a Brick, where you have a poem written by a child to basically the adult world, really has some of that Dickens vibe to it. So let's listen. Thick as a Brick is all just one song, as you probably know, but these songs are divided into different kind of movements of it. Again, it's the spoof of progressive rock. Starting off with Really Don't Mind, which is the part that everyone seems to know because that's what gets played on classic rock radio. Unfortunately, to me, it's the least exciting part of the record. I mean, it's fine. It's a fine intro. But as soon as the Really Don't Mind part happens, and you get the poet and the painter, the album really takes off into a really transcendent way. Then we get into What Do You Do When the Old Man's Gone, which is a great transition to Childhood Heroes, which is kind of the ultimate closing of the first side. We flip the album over and we get See There Is a Man Born, which again does a nice continuation of the first side, but then the album really hits, to me, what is the climax of the album, which is Legends and Believe in the Day. And to me, this is where Thick as a Brick becomes Jethro Tull's greatest work. This is such a great part. And what's great about it, if you just skip to that part, it's not the same as listening to the entire album and naturally getting to that part. From there, from this climax, it doesn't let you down. You get Tales of Your Life, and then you get Childhood Heroes Reprise, which is a great way to end the album. So I'm interested to know what you think of this album. Uh, Let me know if you think it pairs well with a gin, and specifically a traditional gin. Also, let me know in the comments if you agree with my assessment that this is the greatest of all Jethro Tull moments. Please like and subscribe, and until then, cheers.